Hello and welcome to CANNAMAntv. In this interview, I speak with actor, freerunner and cannabis and psychedelic advocate, Lee Anthony. In this interview, we discuss Life of Lee podcast and Lee's experience with mushrooms, DMT, consciousness and human perception, Lee's experience working on Game of Thrones and World War Z, and the importance of maintaining our inner child within our adult life. Make sure and like and subscribe, and join me on Patreon, where you can help to build a stronger cannabis media platform. Now then, let's talk cannabis.
Done an episode where I took 5 gram. I went down the woods myself. I took 5 grams of mushrooms.
Are you on like a hammock? You're kind of like on a hammock, is that right?
I'm in a hammock for a little bit.
Right, yeah.
But there's a bit in it where like I had a complete mental breakdown.
Right.
Complete. And like I would say, it sounds like to someone that hasn't done mushrooms, it sounds like a bad story, but like it was exactly what I needed. It was a complete. To put it in terms of like computers, it was basically like, see if you're going to defrag your computer and like clean it up and shit,
Yeah.
take all the files off, put it on an external hard drive, and then go in, defrag it. What's the other thing you do? Like just clear the cookies and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what happened to me on a biological, metaphysical level. All my memories got wiped, and then I blue screened, and then I got rebooted from the ground up, and I seen each stage of my consciousness like get reactivated in, and it was almost as if I could choose, right, I don't want to hold on to the anger from that thing, we'll just not put that back in. That jealousy that I've got from that, we won't put that in, we'll put in a bit more. It was as if I was designing my own software,
Right.
And then it was all put back in and like put me back on again.
So just that, like, for anybody that's like taking mushrooms, like how would you describe the visual and sensory process that's going on there? So if you're actually moving things, you're moving items and like de-cleansing yourself essentially, but on a audio and like visual process, how would that be defined? Like what was regarded as the audio file, or what was regarded as the stuff that needed discarded? How did you interpret it at the time? What was it disguised as before you interpreted it?
It was more feelings. Like there was a bit just before it where I get trapped in like a time bubble,
right?
And it was like I was entering into the moment, and I was sitting in a field, but it was like I was entering into the moment, and then I was realizing I was in this moment, and then I was entering into the moment again, and
Right.
then I was realizing that I was in this moment again, but then I was entering back into the moment, and this went on and on and on. And I think that was like the ramping up, and then like I say, it was as if I was just taken out and like compartmentalized into something smaller.
Right.
And then all this shit happened, and it was more like colors and like attached to emotions coming in, and everything coming like a swirling back in of consciousness, but everything associated with consciousness, like intelligence and personality and all this stuff. It was all coming in as just like, it's so fucking hard to describe, especially people that haven't done it. Then I was walking through the woods, and like the woods in mine, I've grown up in them. I've spent like 28 years running around these woods. I know every nook and cranny of it. And I was walking up a path that was kind of had like trees overgrown, so it's kind of like not a tunnel you're going through, but it gives you that kind of sense.
Yeah.
But when I was walking, I wasn't seeing what was in front of me. It was as if my mind was bringing back the memories of time that had been there before, and it was stitching all these memories over each other. And that was what I was seeing when I was walking. Like it felt like it had knocked me out of this reality a little bit. And to get back to it, I was relying on my memories of that place to guide me to where I wanted to go. It was such like to anyone listening, don't take mushrooms on your own, like down the woods on the hottest day of the year. Do you know what I mean? If you're interested in doing it, do it in a nice, comfortable setting. This is me going off on like some vision quest, shamanistic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, don't
Experience
anything I say in this podcast. Don't use it as an example for what you should do, because like
so essentially you're experienced. That's the main point. You're experienced, and the individual that's introduced them to it should essentially have somebody like yourself next to them. That's essentially what's going on.
But yeah, that was just one. That was probably my most intense mushroom trip in terms of I didn't know what was happening. All the other mushroom trips I've been able to move within them, and like kind of like tap into stuff, whatever. But that was the one where it was out of my control, and I was just along for the ride. And but I came out of it, and you can see it in the video. Like, I'm walking through this field, and I'm just wearing like sweats. I've got no shoes on, no top on. My hair's down, blowing in the wind. And you've never seen a guy look more free and happy in his entire life. And that's what we were saying before as well. Like, the reason I started my podcast was kind of specifically to talk about my experiences with DMT. But I realized in order to talk about that, I would need to like give the whole story on how I ended up like doing DMT and why I took it as far as I did. Because like I've trained parkour for 20 years now, I've got a very explorative mind, and I always want to like, you know, go further and see things that other people don't, and like see different views, like, and that's just in this world. So when I finally get access to DMT, and it is like literally access to a whole new world, I wanted to explore it as much as possible. And I've probably done DMT more than anyone that I've personally met myself. Like, I've done it well over 300 times now, and I wouldn't recommend that. There's a lot of people that do DMT once and they never have to do it again because it's just they get it. But I just wanted to keep pushing it and exploring it. And I had some great experiences, but I definitely took it too far. And then, like, the last two trips that I had with DMT, I started doing shadow work with it. I'd seen a guy on a forum had said that he was using acid, LSD, to do shadow work. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, like, shadow work is basically confronting the dark or bad aspects of your personality, like the stuff we ignore, the justifications we have for our bad actions, our jealousy, our resentments, you know, all the things that hold us back and all the stuff that we just ignore about ourselves. It's confronting that and then integrating it. And you can do shadow work with therapy. You know, you can sit for a long time and dig through all this stuff and talk about it for years and hopefully get to that point. Or you can use psychedelics and really expedite the process. So the guy that I ended up talking to, he'd done it with LSD. He said he had great effects with it. And I thought, well, my drug of choice right now is DMT. So, and I asked him, like, do you think DMT would be a good way to do it? He said, yeah, just set your intention. Like, that's what you want to use it for this time, and away you go. So, I sat there, and like, DMT is, it's just such a powerful thing, no matter what your intention is. If you're just wanting to go and see the realm and meet entities or whatever it is, and that's powerful enough. But when you actually specifically try and use it as a tool to do something like this, it really goes in that direction. So I sent the intention. I wanted to do shadow work. I had a rough idea, as we all do, of my like shortcomings and that kind of shit. And I kind of thought I knew what was going to happen, but this was so intense and so horrific. It was like it was basically, I was going through a tunnel that looked like a hellscape, an absolute hellscape. Like, the walls were like demon beasts that were melting into each other, and there was claws coming out and faces, and it had a very if you've seen the film Constantine, when he goes to
Yeah.
hell, and so that was exactly it. But this was getting, again, like on DMT, when you communicate with either just the consciousness that's out there or individual beings, it's a weird psychic not telekinetic, but it's not psychic like thoughts. It's like an emotional gestalt of just imagery and all that kind of stuff. And as I was going through this hellish tunnel, it was getting explained to me that this was representative of my bad habits, my addictions, the lies that I tell myself, other people, my fucking motivations and spite and pettiness. And you tell yourself you're a good person, you tell yourself all this shit, but all that stuff's buried within us. Do you know what I mean? Some people just bury it more than others, but this was getting laid bare, and I was getting dragged through it. And like, usually the DMT experience is beautiful. Like, I've came out of trips bawling my eyes out at the sheer beauty that I was able to witness. Like, you will see colors that cannot exist in this reality. You see shapes of like impossible angles. It is a completely other realm, and it's majestic and it's like magical, and all of that intensity that you usually have when you're seeing the beauty, that was translated through this lens of utter despair and horror. And at the very end of the trip, it kind of like, it was as if it was taking me around the back of the DMT realm, and it was showing me like all the lights, you know, like as if you were like driving up to Disneyland and you could see it, and it kind of let me know like all that's here waiting on you, but you need to go and do the work in your reality that we've shown you. And I kind of didn't. And then a couple of months later, I tried to have another DM trip with a girl that I was dating, and I thought like maybe the entities will have forgotten about all that stuff, and I can just kind of sneak back in and have a nice wee trip. But no, it was the exact same, if not worse. And this time, I actually was feeling almost physical pain from it. There was like fire, whippy stuff, and when it was hitting me, I don't know if it was like your mind makes it real kind of thing, but it wasn't nice. And again, it was getting explained to me like, you've not done the work. We showed you exactly what you should have done and how you should have done it and what you needed to cut out and that kind of stuff. You're still being lazy, you're still being fucking greedy, whatever the fuck. So do the work. So I've finally started, because it's a long process. Like I was talking to my mate about this, like when you decide to kind of unfuck yourself and you start looking around at the stuff that you fucked up, you realize how much stuff you've fucked up and how much work it's going to take to get you to the place where you want to be, and you realize that it's going to become basically a lifelong challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is what it is. Like there's a artist like that I really like, Devin Townsend, like a musician, and I've seen him last March, and that's what he says. Like he's just reached 50, and he says he's Canadian. He's like, well, guys, I think later on in life you realize that the point of life is to try and unfuck yourself from everything that you've done when you were younger. And that's where I've been the last couple of years, trying to unfuck myself.
Just to interject there, Lee, do you know what that kind of sounds like? That sounds like, I'm not biased towards any religion whatsoever, but that's essentially the whole Jesus comes because we're all sinners, and if you embrace his archetypal way of behavior, then you can cleanse yourself of those inevitable sins. That's what it kind of sounds like.
For me, it's just I'm a very contradictive person in my actions. Like I've trained, you know, parkour for as long as I have, which is a very physical discipline, but I smoke cigarettes, you know what I mean, which is fucking mental. Like my diet's terrible, absolutely. Like my diet's basically salt, sugar, and cigarettes. That's it, you know what I mean? And all this was getting shown to me. Like when you're born, you're basically handed the keys to the most advanced machine in the known universe. You know what I mean? And most people use that to just sit at a desk and drive to work, to sit at a desk, to come home, to sit on a couch. Like we've got immense power and we can accomplish great things, but like to then run that machine on Doritos and fucking donuts and that kind of stuff, you know, like and that's what was getting shown to me, like that kind of like self abuse and holding myself back. Like I would be a better athlete if I had a better diet. I'd be a better athlete if I, you know, stopped smoking and that kind of stuff. And I love parkour, I love training, but the other stuff's just easier. You know what I mean? It's easier to put on a film and grab some munchies and, you know, smoke some joints than it is to go outside and try a new flip and maybe hurt yourself and that kind of stuff. And all this was getting shown to me. Like it's the lies you tell yourself, it's the little deceits, it's the sins against yourself more than anything else. And how much I was holding myself back. But yeah, I'm at a place now where I'm just trying to focus on bettering myself a bit rather than just maintaining. You know, and we'll see how that goes. Like I say, it's a lifelong process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, man. And again, you know, flooding pieces of information passing my mind as you're talking here, and it's like one of them was that you know, the condition that we were essentially born into. First off, the robotic job that inevitably all of us have to gain as a consequence of being in a default financial position. We're born in a position where you know, you have to get money, and at the same time you have to get money, but then you have this obstacle put in front of you, which tends to be bullshit aestheticism in the form of fast food, in the form of like hedonism, essentially the hedonistic position, and the hedonistic position is in conflict with spiritual development. And it seems to be that the spiritual development element seems to be the normative ground which everybody should be attempting to reach. And it's weird that, because that's what makes me think that. I was like, well, what is this thing? What is this dynamic where we're kind of all questing for a sensation of cleansing? And that, because I was thinking as well, like we've got the people where they're like, if there was no bad in the world, then everything would be fine. And the truth, and the bad in this context is poor diet, poor person, poor spirituality, all these kind of things. But the truth is, there could never be that position. It seemed, and that's what seems so peculiar. And I think that's what the yin and yang, the circle, the cyclic element of life, and the fact that when you're saying at the beginning of the conversation, when you're like, when you were going through that mushroom trip and you were walking, because that's all that kept pumping to mind, that you were walking through and you're walking back and then repeating that action over and over, and that's very suggestive of a cyclic nature. And we're dealing with autumn into spring into summer. We're dealing with cycles on a microscopic level and on a macroscopic level. I'm going to start boring people with that fucking phrase, but it's just really peculiar, right? Because I really think that that's like I always, I think what the thing is, and we all do it, man, right? And that's what's interesting when you said about your mates, the 5-year gap on either side, and how there can be a funneling of information where it's kind of like why funnel information? Why attempt with progressive development? Why attempt to always better? Because it seems to be like fundamental. It seems to be like a normative ground. It seems to be like there's an element of continuous progression that's almost defined inside of the person and inside of the human, and I think it just makes me question, and that's the reason I was saying any of this in the first place, is that we're all attempting through the process of exchanging information, through the process of conversations like this, through the process of like what have you learned about life, we're all attempting to figure out what is fundamentally like absolute, like what is this fundamental, like what is it? And in my mind, it's like, it seems so anticlimactic, but at the stage I'm at currently, it's that absolute is that we're in a cyclic position that's defined based in yin and yang, order and chaos, left and right. It seems to be that there's this, that it's most likely people would be like, oh, it's just dualism, and essentially that's what it is. But I was having a conversation with somebody else the other day, and I was like, that dualistic position is, from one interpretation, like yin and yang. But that's too close. If you were to zoom away from that dualistic position, which is still true, it's contained inside of a unified position. It's contained inside of a non-dualistic position. So it seems to be that there's like the spectrum of existence is built on a paradox. That's what it seems like. And it's really peculiar, man. It's really, and in my mind, I'm like, well, what the fuck's the point in that? And then, I don't know, like, what comes after that. If we're in this position where dualism's accurate, non-dualism's accurate, they will both essentially live inside one another, or at the very minimum, dualism lives inside non-dualism, because the unit of existence is based and defined based on a cyclic opposites, opposites attract moving forward, that kind of thing. That still seems like it's almost like not quite far enough away to see what it truly is. It's like to be too close to it, you're like, it's dualism. To be further away, more of it, you realize it's a unified dualism. After that, what's the next one? Like, what is the next fucking, like, it's like, I hate to get DMT, man, and break through this fucking thing.
I think part of the problem is like, we're a part of it, you know what I mean? We are within it. It's like a spark plug in a car, it doesn't know what the outside of the car looks like. It doesn't know what the full thing is. All it knows is it must spark, and it connects to this bit. It's very enclosed inside the whole machine, but there's so much going on around it.
See, I would say, I would say there actually, I would say that the spark plug in this context would be that the spark plug is aware of the machine. It's just not aware of the journey. It just doesn't know. It's like it knows it's inside the car. It just doesn't know where the car's going. That's what it sounds like.
That's an even better analogy of it. And that's just when you said, have you done DMT?
I have. So I'll describe my experience of DMT. It was really butchered, man. It was fucked. I've only done it one time, but we did it 3 times in the space of an hour, really. That's what it was kind of like. But so which tells you straight away that you didn't fucking go anywhere close. But essentially, my experience was consumed it. I felt the what is it called when it's like numbness? Aestheticism. No, what is it? Sorry?
The anesthesia.
Yeah, anesthesia, that's it. Awesome. It's the anesthesia. So I immediately felt that. I was like, immediately my whole body was almost essentially numb, whereas like I couldn't feel, it essentially creeped from my feet all the way up, and then it stopped to my neck, where my whole body was numb. And then I closed my eyes, and I had this like lava lamp fucking style thing going on behind my eyes kind of thing. And at the same time as there's this movement, this fucking like it's just this, just color movement. There's like almost like I can feel myself floating upwards, and it was just continuously progressing upwards as this thing's moving back and forward. interestingly, before I took it, I was like anxiety, my heart was fucking pounding. Took the first fucking draw, blew it out. Anxiety faded slightly, took the second draw, blew it out. At this point in time, it's almost like my arms are fucking shaking and I'm trying to put the fucking pipe to the side. And as I'm putting the pipe down, like I'm looking at my hand, the anxiety is completely gone by this point. I don't feel nervous whatsoever. I'm like, it's completely neutralized the anxiety after the second toke, and I've blown it out. And as I'm putting the fucking pipe down, it's like I can see like my hand immediately cartoon mode. Immediately fucking my arm was like cartoon, and there was like lines that, like, this is what was cool. There was green lines going over my arm, like it sounds so stupid, but green binary code, matrix shit. That's essentially what it looked like. But I was like green binary code, green fucking lines going over my arms. And as I'm putting it down, I looked across the living room. There was my sister's boyfriend's on the couch. He was doing the same thing. And between me and him and the walls and the TV and all this kind of thing was essentially tram lines, I would say, of connection. So just tram lines of these fucking green beams, everything. Sorry?
Was it in the air?
All of it. It was like the framework of the building. This framework of the room we were in there was nothing detached from each other. Every single thing was all fucking connected. All these green fucking beams, like the side of here was connected over there, and there's a line fucking everywhere. So I closed my eyes, started feeling this fucking like the inevitably stereotypical psychedelic movement behind my eyes, like lava lamp shit. I'm moving upwards, continuously, and that's what was cool. Was as I'm moving upwards, the psychedelic fucking movement, and as I'm like, so I felt like I was like ascending, and then at the same time as seeing this behind my eyes, this movement of color, and I had this overwhelming sensation of presence. So there was like a fucking shadow figure at the top. It's like I can almost see it at the top of my eyes, like not at the top of my eyes, but like the top of my vision. When my eyes are closed, I could see at the top of my vision, and once my eyes are closed, like this shadow figure. And it was like ushering me up. It was kind of, and the impression I got from it was like that it seen me as like it felt like a parental force. It felt like so, and it's as I'm fucking moving upwards there, it's kind of like, come on then, hurry up, fucking, and it kind of gave me this impression that it kind of thought I was a bit of a like Jack the Lad. Like it thought that I thought that, you think you're something, come on, you think you're something special, move your arse, fucking hell, but almost with this derisive fucking parent, like, oh, he's a pain in the arse, but he's well intentioned, that feeling. And so it was like, come on in, dickhead, and it was like moving me up, and then it just slowed down, it's kind of stopped, he started to fade a bit, and then I just started going down the way again. And that was essentially the process every time. That was like, it hit a peak. It was like I couldn't go anywhere. It was like something's happening. No, nothing's happening. On the last time when we took it like an hour later, I kept my eyes open, and when my eyes were open, it was like a really short fucking acid trip, and size, the shapes and the sizes of the mirror. So I'm lying on I'm sitting on the chair, and I look over, and the mirror inevitably has a 90-degree angle, and but it felt like the 90-degree angle on the outside of the mirror was like a fucking hallway. You know what I mean? I'm looking, like, what the fuck? And it's like going on just this hallway of fucking. So, and that's because I kept my eyes open the whole time. I've watched it kind of like peek at like everything was shape, everything was all these perfectly like symmetrical fucking shapes, and particularly the mirror, when it felt like it went on for fucking days. And I'm not looking in the mirror, by the way, it's on the right hand side of the wall, so it's not like I'm looking in the mirror for reflection. I'm looking on the outside of where the reflective part would be, and it's the wall that's fucking like a street. It's like that kind of thing. And it just seemed like that, and everything, like the TV became the same thing, and then I faded down, and then it fucked off. But interestingly, that's what I was going to say. The feeling of presence and the feeling of being ushered up and like, come on, was quite interesting, because when I'd said to them, my sister's man, like, so what did you feel? And he was like, well, he had a similar thing. He's like, I was kind of moving up and fucking going that way and that kind of thing. And it felt like it was a party in the distance, and it was all like celebratory, and everybody's like, hey, and cheering and like, come on and try to get me there. He says, but then it just went away and faded and fucked off. And I think we probably just ruined it because like we didn't have the correct pipe. We had to we mixed it with fucking stuff, so we burnt away fucking most of it. So I'd definitely be like, what we were hoping for was a breakthrough. You're chatting to folk, you're like, what the fuck is this? And you bring information back, So I mean, you described at the beginning that you've obviously been there. You described a realm. Like, how would you detail it? Like, would you say it's similar to like a like simulation theory when you walk into a VR world, that kind of shit?
Like that's an it's interesting you bring that up. Like, one of the most important trips I've had where I've interacted with entities, and I'll send you a picture. I've googled this before, and there's like someone's done a mock-up of something that looks almost like what I seen, but what I seen was just so much more advanced. So
right. I'll put that up, like, by the way. I'll put that up on the screen. That would be perfect.
Yeah. I know you edit stuff in it, and these guys, it looked like, I'll take you through it. So I was kind of deep into my DMT at this point. I'd started like making it and stuff, so I always had it. I was doing it not every night, but 2, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a week. And this trip, I hit the pipe. It comes on so quick. It comes on. You're blowing out the first draw, and you're already like going there. Took the third one, held it in. I don't can't even remember blowing it out, and I was there. And it was usually it's kind of common. It doesn't happen for everyone, but it's like you go through a kind of kaleidoscopic tunnel,
Mm.
like kind of like Stargate when they go through, and it's that kind of vibe, but just so much more intense. Like as Terence McKenna says, this stuff is unenglishable.
Yeah.
Like I can the amount of times I've done this and stuff I've seen, and I still come back like, "Bleh." Like you just can't. I like I just don't have the words to transcribe everything that I've seen. But so this particular time I hit it, and I went through the tunnel, and then I was walking in this silver path, and it seemed to be like if you played Mario Kart,
Mm.
Rainbow Road, the track it was again that's the closest I can representation I can give you. But it was kind of like a Rainbow Road, like just a silver path, but it felt like it was like an access route on the outside of like not even just the universe, but like reality, like the mechanism of reality was over here, and this was like a little path around the side of it. So I was walking in this path for like ages, just walking, and then it opened up a little bit, and there was these three identical beings, and they looked like if humans evolved for the next billion years and they integrate technology and every single spiritual fucking truth and they reach the highest possible incarnation of a being. That's what these three motherfuckers look like. And they look like just like the universe incarnate. They look like they were made of like just the fabric of reality. So I started asking them some questions because why the fuck wouldn't you? And the first question I usually don't tell people this, but it's kind of relevant. Like I tried to kill myself in 2010.
Right.
Was in a bad place. It fucking just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But I was saved at like the last minute in kind of weird like circumstances and shit. And since then, like it was after that, like I started acting and stuff. And like I started taking parkour more seriously. We got like sponsored by Puma and shit. And since then, like not to get too deep, but I'm just so happy that since that day, I've done stuff. I've spoke to people. I've made people laugh. I've loved people. People have loved me. I've achieved stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, like 17th of September 2010, that was it for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that should have been the end because I was committed to this. I've got quite a strong mentality when I decide something, I see it through, and I'd committed to this. And the sense of relief that I felt because I was dealing with shit that there was shit going on around me that I couldn't deal with because it didn't have a lot to do with me, but it affected me.
Mm-hmm.
But because I wasn't really in it, there was nothing I could do about it. It was just fucking very fucked up situation. And this just seemed like the right thing to do. And when I came to this realization, like the sense of relief that I felt because I was making a decision that I was making and I could see this through and it was my choice and that kind of stuff. And then it was kind of taken away from me in a
Mm-hmm.
way. And I was like, yo, I don't think I'm going to have the balls to like psych myself up to do that again. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of angry that I was still here. You know what I mean? I thought I was getting an out. Do you know what I mean? And it would have been a fucked up thing to do, like in the circumstances. But I think people also would have fucking understood what was happening. But since then, I've seen every day as just extra time. Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? And it's freed me up to do a lot of the things that I've done because to me it's just like all this is just extra. Like it took away a lot of the fear of doing stuff in this life because I shouldn't be here anyway.
Yeah.
In my mind. Anyway, this is all to say when I asked these entities because of the way that day that it ended up not happening, it was just such a bizarre synchronistic turn of events. And I asked them if I was special in any way, if there was like a reason that that happened that day to stop me doing what I was going to do, because I know a lot of people that I would say are better men than fucking me that have done it. So why the fuck would like it did seem as if the universe conspired to keep me here that day, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I asked these three entities if I was special anyway, and they said, yes, you are God, you are Jesus, you are Buddha, you are the one. Now, at the time, I was like, holy shit, that's interesting, but I've spoke to other people that have had similar interactions, and it's just, they weren't specifically telling me
Mm-hmm.
that I'm fucking Jesus or special. They're just saying, like, everybody's fucking got that, like, everybody is that interpretation, that representation of Jesus, Buddha. We're all fucking enlightened beings, but we've just forgot, kind of thing. And that's what they were trying to imply. So the second thing I asked them was, is my reality a simulation? Now, I'm a big believer, in simulation hypothesis, as proposed by physicist Neil Bostrom. I think that's his name. And he basically like postulates that there's three possible outcomes. One, humans will wipe themselves out before we reach like photorealistic simulations that we can be a part of. We'll wipe ourselves out. Number two, we'll develop the technology, but we won't want to do that. Like we won't develop it for some reason. But looking at the way the world's gone, obviously, if you know what I mean, looking at how computer engines and that stuff, like the graphics that can replicate now, obviously we're going to keep going in like the Oculus Rift or the Meta. I know Meta bought it over. I don't know what they're calling it, and the VR
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
We're definitely going down that path. So the third outcome is basically like humans have already reached an advanced point in technology, and they got to this point of creating photorealistic, fully immersive VR simulations, and we're actually an ancestor simulation that they've created. Like, so say maybe the year's actually like 2097, and the people there are like, oh, we'll create like a GTA 5 that took place during the pandemic of 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're living in now. It's like future generations have built an ancestor simulation that we live in. So that's the official hypothesis. I kind of came up with my own simulation hypothesis when I was younger and smoking weed, and it was basically simple. Like I've got great interest in science, and I love like I'm not saying I understand it. I don't want to be that kind of pretentious, but I love just the thought of quantum mechanics and all that kind of shit. Like the basic thought that everything that we take to be solid is made up of. No, there's a great quote. I can't remember who said it, but everything that we take to be real is made up of stuff that can't possibly be real
Mm-hmm.
when you get to the subatomic part and the subatomic level. So I was like, if you're playing The Sims, if you imagine like if you imagine you are a sim and you're in the simulation, and you realize that you're a sentient being, right? The first thing that you would do is the same thing that we done. You would want to find out what everything was. So like what we done with science fucking back in the day, you go out and you start naming everything. Like that's a tree, that bit's a branch, that's a leaf. Right, we'll get that leaf, we'll cut that open. Right, fuck, there's shit inside this. Right, we'll call that. And then you keep going smaller and smaller, and you cut stuff open. You want to see how everything works. And then this reality, eventually you get to the point where it's all atoms. You're like, what? It's all atoms? And like, yep, the tree atoms, the leaf atoms, you atoms, me atoms. It's all made up of atoms, just in different configurations. So if you were a sentient sim in that simulated reality on the computer, you would start doing the same thing, and the computer would maybe like you cut into like a human and simulate like blood or tissue or whatever. But eventually, it would get to the point where like, oh, it's just pixels.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, what? It's all pixels, and you'd be like, yep, the tree pixels, you pixels, me, it's all pixels, and that's when I realized that back in the day. I was like, well, that's the same as our reality. We're just all
Yeah.
atoms. I mean, I don't know how basic this is or how complex it is, but to my understanding, I was like, well, that means we're in a fucking simulation then.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked these three entities, is my reality a simulation? And they were so infused about it. They like this is almost verbatim. They went, yes, your reality is 100% a simulation, but not in the way that you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking of it in terms of computers and that kind of stuff because that's the technology your mind has access to. And it's kind of like that, but it's also completely different. And then they said, one day you will be outside of the system. You will understand how everything worked, what your place was in it, why you had to go through what you went through, why everyone went through what they went through. One day you will be outside of the system. But until then, when you go back, you do not need to worry about a single thing. Anything that pops up, any of the human drama or that kind of shit, you don't need to worry about any of it. Just know that one day you'll know what everything was meant to be, and everything is exactly how it's meant to be. I'm like, cool. And then that was me. I came back. But that to me, like, and like, I'll probably tell a couple of DMT stories throughout this. And anyone listening, you can caveat it by saying, yeah, you were on drugs, you were tripping out, you were seeing fucking wee green men and all that kind of shit. But the thing about the DMT experience is, like, the amount of corresponding reports across countries and cultures that all say that that experience is more real than this experience. And that's what I've told people. Like, when you do DMT and you have a full on breakthrough experience, you realize that this is the trip. See, being here for 70, 80 years as like separate individuals and like fucking having emotions and like all that, that's the trip. Because when you come out of here, you return to the source. Like that's, you asked earlier, like what's the realm like in the DMT realm? I firmly believe that it is the source. Like you'll get people philosophizing, where did we go when we die? But not a lot of people ask, where were we before we were born? And it's the same fucking place. And this, I came up with the cloud analogy that I use a lot. Like if you imagine a cloud, all the raindrops are within that cloud, but they're not separate yet. They're just vapor. They've no individuality. They've no distinction among themselves. They're just vapor in the cloud. So then the cloud starts to rain. These raindrops come down, and when they leave the cloud, they think, "Oh, I'm an individual now. I'm a separate thing." And even though a minute ago you were all one, you now think that you're separate. That one's separate, and everyone that's fallen down is separate. So then you've basically got the luck of the draw. You know, some of these raindrops will land in a river and they'll get swept away. Some will land in a puddle and they'll stay in the same place. Some will land on Buckingham Palace. Some will land in a fucking council estate, and it's just your Donald Duck wherever you land. So each raindrop will land. Each raindrop will live out its life, and then it evaporates. And once it evaporates, it loses the separation again, and it goes back up into the cloud, and it's just a vapor, and it's lost all of its distinction. And that's what I believe this life is. Like your consciousness, when it comes down to here, it's given that illusion of separation so that we can experience, like we were talking about, duality and non-duality before. And that's what I think I'm gleaming this. Like I started studying Buddhism at a very young age, just looking for something different from what I was getting taught. Like I wasn't raised to be a Christian, but I was in like BBs and went to Sunday school just because it was what was happening around. You know, that's what my mates were doing and shit. But I started to notice holes in it, like some big holes. It's what I call, I've got a lot of analogies, and I call this the Santa Claus analogy. Like when I was growing up, I was told two stories. Like there's a fat guy with a beard, and if you're good, there's a fat guy with a beard and he's magical. He can do miracles, and if you're good, he'll give you stuff. You just have to ask him for it. And then there's a skinny guy with a beard, and he's magical and he can perform miracles. And if you're good, he'll give you stuff. You just need to pray for it. And then I got a little bit older, and it turned out like the Santa Claus thing was a conspiracy. And this is what fucks me up. Like people talk about conspiracies like 9/11 and shit, and they're like, oh, but everybody, so many people would need to be in on it, blah blah blah. They could never pull that off. When I was young, everybody was in on the Santa Claus conspiracy. Every fucking person told me that this was a real thing. I met the fucker. I sat in his lap. I got my picture taken. So don't tell me like conspiracy theories are fucked up. So yeah, like when I was young, I finally found out the Santa Claus thing was bullshit. Everyone was lying about it, and my first kind of reaction was, right, so the other guy's bullshit as well, right? Like the Jesus walking on water kind of miracle guy. No, 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 that one's real. I'm like, come on, dude, fuck. How the fuck? No, like, no, if you're gonna make up fucking stories, I'd rather have Batman than fucking this guy. So that's like, I started studying fucking Buddhism and meditation and all this kind of shit at a very, very young age, and then that's just led me to studying a lot of different things to try and get a better understanding of why I'm here. And my ultimate understanding through what I've read and learned, intuited, and what I've downloaded from psychedelic trips is like in the beginning, and I can't explain what happened before this, but in the beginning there was just raw consciousness, like that's what was, and then this consciousness knew that it existed, but that was it. And in order for it to actually experience anything, it needed to divide. And the first time that it divided itself, duality, it could then experience light, dark, rain, dry, like just experience. And then it thought like, well, if I divide again and again and again and again, then I can experience everything. I can experience a multitude of things and understand myself better. And that's what I feel. Um, that's what I think we are. I think we're all just a spark of the same thing that's came down. I kind of like think of sandcastles in a way. Like if you're at the beach making sandcastles and you get like dry sand and you add a little bit of water, put it in the bucket and make that sandcastle. The sand is like the physical universe, like the atoms in our bodies were forged in stars billions of years ago. The iron, the carbon, the like that was formed in stars. We are literally the universe incarnate, and that's the sand that's in the sandcastle, and the little bit of water to just hold it together. That's the splash of consciousness that we obviously have, whatever you want to call it, spirit, soul, consciousness, and we get to spend our time on the beach, but then the wave, death, comes crashing over us, and the little bit of consciousness, the water returns back to the beach. Do you know what I mean? And then it's free to get made and remolded into another consciousness or whatever the fuck. And that's like I heard a great quote that says we're all just walking each other home. And see when you look out at the world, that kind of just attitude of like no one knows what the fuck's happening. No one really knows the ultimate thing, but we all know like we've got this end point coming up at some fucking time, and it could happen at any time, and we're all just moving towards it. So don't be a dick. Don't fucking add to anyone else's stress. Don't go out of your way to hurt anybody, because we've all got death coming up anyway. We've all got that fucking end point. So just be as nice as you can and walk each other home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
awesome, Lee. I love it, man. Love it. Because it's, again, several points. So, first off,
sorry.
dynamite, man. That you're no, this is fucking dynamite, man. First off, like, it's phenomenal that we're talking. The fact that you were in that position, that you were in that place, and you're now here, man. I feel like genuinely, like, when you're talking about that, and then you're like sitting here now, man. There's almost a level of excitement that was the case. It's really, it's fucking dynamite that didn't go the other way, quite honestly, because as you're fully aware, it could happen often, and males, between a particular age group seems to be predominant. So, fucking dynamite that's the case.
Just to interject real quick, like I know that's quite a fucking a taboo kind of topic to just drop on people, but
Not at
honestly,
all.
the more that I can, like, I not long, like a couple of years after my incident, two guys that I kind of knew took their own lives, and I ended up it affected me. Do you know what I mean? Because these guys had like families and that kind of shit, and like just the situation they were in. That's what they done, and I ended up writing this post on Facebook, just recounting what I'd been through and the fact like if I had done what I'd done that day, I wouldn't have achieved this. I wouldn't have done this, and these people like I have had an impact since I've still been here, and that's the more I feel, the more I can tell people that. You know what I mean? Like taking your own life is obviously a very permanent solution to a temporary problem that you're facing. And like if you do hang around, things can get better, but you do need to hang around, even if it feels like I did not want to be here. Like there was nothing, I had nothing at that time. I had no prospects, I had no fucking ambition, I had no nothing. And I honestly thought like not a lot of people would have gave a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just I'm not meant to be here at this time. This is just fucking, there's too much shit. I can't do anything about it. People fucking don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And, but the fact that it didn't happen what I've been able to do now, and even like you say, like having this conversation, I don't know who would have been sitting here or not sitting here if I wasn't here. That kind of thing, and like just you need to. I know it's fucking so easy to say, but you need to have hope. Do you know what I mean? It took me a long time to learn that. So the more I can tell my story, and then people like can see what I've achieved, and like I ended up fucking leading an army, like Game of Thrones, the biggest fucking TV show ever. When I was going to do that, like I, I had dreamed of being an actor, but it was never something I thought I could actually do. So to still be here and then go on to achieve that, like that's enough for me. Like I could fucking get hit by a car tomorrow, touch wood, I don't, but I could do that and I would be satisfied with what I've achieved, but I wouldn't have achieved that stuff if I hadn't went to the point that I went to. Do you know what I mean?
100%. But what just because so you've touched on Game of Thrones there, man. What I was going to say was, so we'll get to that in a bit, because a few of the points that you made about your metaphors, your analogies, I should say, and you know, it's dynamite, man, right? Because I find it really intriguing as well, particularly because what you're describing through analogy is more helpful. It's almost like a guide, and it makes me kind of question the nature of analogy, the nature of story, and all that kind of stuff. And also when you're talking about the cycles, how it's like almost like a cyclic basis. It kind of reminded me of a geometric fractal. That's what's going on there on a human level. It's and we interpret through trials and tribulations, circumstance, through lifestyle, through the everything that's going on in the human experience. If you get a far enough away perspective, you would see that repetition, even from our daily lives to the courses of months and years, is a fractal like structure, and that's what I find really intriguing, because right inside that fractal like structure is like human experience, human emotion, questions of things like morality that obviously we've contained a framework for. We've called it morality because it's actually an exchange of it's like a mechanistic exchange between us, but that mechanistic exchange of morality that we've called it morality is essentially it's a foundation building block which contributes towards how society progresses. Therefore, it's not detached from the whole. And I just find it really interesting, because inside of that dynamic, in order to really kind of make individuals' minds become aware that that's what's going on, such as when you're describing how the consciousness is the moisture, it maintains the sand, the structure through the sand, all that kind of stuff, and how death is essentially the shore coming in and out. It just makes it's really intriguing that the analogy is so poignant, and it contributes in such a great way in order to make us realize these things. And I think that's what's so interesting about the psychedelic experience, because the truth is, unless you've had an extremely small dose, but you can still kind of do narrative with that, when you've had a specific amount, a certain amount, an amount that was necessary, you interpret it almost exclusively through an analogical lens. That's what it's like, a metaphorical lens, because it's the only way. It's almost like it's like a definition. There's a basis. There's a basis that's required for that. And I just find it all intriguing. It's like this interconnected circumstance. It's fascinating. Really, it's fascinating, because again, it gets to that point where it's like, what is? It seems like the entire purpose is interpretation. It seems like, because when you're describing your own circumstance, and obviously you wouldn't have been here opposed to the life that you've now lived, and the life that you've now lived has been full of meaning, and it's been orientated, and it's only defined by meaningful based in the perceiver. And I think that as you're fully aware that, obviously, as you mentioned before, you look down, it's the microscopic and all that kind of stuff. There seems to be, again, it's like, what the fuck is that? The meaning is also necessary, but meaning can only exist with a perceiver. So again, that's a dualistic circumstance that's contained inside of a unified field of consciousness. And it's like, well, what the fuck? What is that? What is that circumstance? Because again, like when you're talking about it as well, when you're speaking to the three entities, and they're like, it is a simulation, it is that kind of thing. Because it was fascinating, quite honestly, because when, as you mentioned before, on the quantum mechanic level, there is no still object. There's a collection of moving elements on such a microscopic level that we could never even comprehend it. It's a magical fucking description if you were to go back a few hundred years. Interestingly, that's why, genuinely, I think that's why things like magic and articulation of speech and all these different things kind of can manipulate these energies and through intention. But it's really peculiar, man. And I mean, what have you, like, so that's maybe before we start talking about, because again, we'll have to come back to this in the conversation, but before we start talking about like Game of Thrones in your acting career, like, how would you interpret the nature of the existence then? Like, a lot of people are like, Like I've got a friend, and she says, it's like life is meaningless, and but there is meaning in the meaningless. I'm butchering her words, but it's along the lines of that. That she's like, there is no meaning to this, right? And I think that's why we had the conversation, because like there is no meaning to this, and in my mind, I'm like, you know, what if it's all about that? What if it's all meaning? And the whole point is, it's like, well, what on like hypothetically, if I was to walk down that theory, like if it's all meaning, hypothetically, like if I was to not address her position, if it was all meaning, why? Like, what is the function of that dynamic then? Because obviously, like anything, like I think Stephen Hawking, I think he had his a description, obviously ultra science dude, and he said this thing where the nature of us even being aware, being conscious, being aware of our existence in itself would be regarded as a miracle, because the time frame necessary for that thing to be achieved is so unlikely that it's
Yep.
insane that it happened. Therefore, that would kind of contribute towards a purposeful there's an intent there almost. It seems like there's an intent almost for something to be so improbable and yet to arrive. I'm sure there's loads of scientists that would be watching like, fuck you, mate, you don't know enough. And it's like, that's true. That's totally true. I feel you, bro. But it's just, I find it really intriguing. And it does seem to be that meaning is attached to what the geometric fractal of existence of the human experience is. And I don't know if it's just a consequence of, like, we engage in the daily experience, therefore we apply meaning to it to explain what it is we're going through. I don't know if it's that, but even if that's the case, there's a precursor to our existence to then allow the meaning to be explained. And I just think it's like, again, that fucking even conversation, that argument is cyclic. That's on and on and on and on, and then you're falling down a rabbit hole. It's like over and over. It's just, if that's the case, if there's an interchangeable basis there, what the fuck's, why do we even have it? Why is it there? Why is that cycle present? If it's the nature of that. And again, when you talked about the simulation thing, like I think it was Elon Musk that said that. He says if you even contemplate any form of technological progression, any percentage, you eventually reach a point where in this situation of a simulation theory would be inevitable. And that's the way it is. Rewind back 20, 30 years, VR would have been science fiction. We now have extremely impressive VR systems. So what does that mean then in 100 years, 1,000 years? It seems like the likelihood of us being, and this is a reality or in a simulation theory, the likelihood of that is just defined on a time scale. That's what that seems like. So if I was to ask that question then, Lee, right? So what would you interpret this entire existential position to be? Like, well, through your experience of the DMT world, and when the entities are saying to you, like, it's what essentially, what would you describe this as? What is the human experience? Is it just to experience?
Well, that, like, just to go back a second, one thing that I like that you were saying there is the fractal nature of life, because I've pondered this before. Like, each day is, like, you wake up in the morning and it's like a new birth, and then you go to sleep at night and it's like a death. Like, each day is almost a representative of the whole, and the more you look into it, the more it just represents it again and again and again. So I don't exactly have an explanation of that, but I do agree with the fractal nature of it. And fractals themselves are just something that fucking fascinates me. But from my experience in everything that I've been through in this reality, and then also my experiences in the DMT realm, it is purely and simply to experience as much as you can. That is why we're given this ultimate gift of life, and it is just to laugh as much as you can, cry as much as you can. Like, there's no, something I realized a few years ago, there's no essentially good or bad situation. Everything, like, nothing is inherently good. There's always, if something good happens to someone, there will be some kind of seed of badness within it, and if something perceived as bad happens to someone, there will be a seed of goodness within it, however horrific it might be to try and look for that. Do you know what I mean? And I think, like, to just put yourself out your comfort zone as much as possible is one of the key things. And it's something, especially in my adult life, I've tried to combat fear as much as I possibly can in so many different facets. Like, training parkour is a very direct way to overcome fears, but also, like, I'd been acting for a couple of years and I saw a casting call looking for topless butlers or bare bum butlers. And the call said, like, are you the life and soul of the party? Are you charismatic? Are you this, that? And I'm like, I'm none of those things. There's no way I could do that job. So I applied for it because I knew I could pull it off. Like, I had the physicality for it, and I knew I could act my way through it. but the actual putting myself in that position, that's what I had a problem with, and I had to put myself in that position to overcome that. I couldn't have just like says, oh, I could have done that or not. Like I've done stand up for the first time at the start of last year. I've not done it since then. I should have done, but again, that was something that I kept watching and thinking I could do that, and I started writing sets, and like I would write it and then just put it away and not think about it, and then I was like, I need to know if I can do this, and it's not. I didn't take to that stage thinking, oh, I'm going to be fucking making a DVD within a year or fucking that. It was literally, I want to see if I can walk on this stage, deliver this material, and walk off. That is my only goal connected to this. If something else happened, it was the same with acting. But with the comedy, I had to see. I would rather have the story of doing it than the regret of not doing it. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather have the story of doing it, regardless of how it turned out, than say, "Oh, yeah, I could have done that," but you know, because I've heard people say, "Oh, I could have done this my whole life," and it's like, but you didn't. So why the fuck are you talking right now? I'd rather say, "Oh, I've done that," because then people are like, how'd it go? I'm like, well, you know, because then you've got the story, then you've got the experience, and that's seriously what I feel it is. And there's too many people that live their life just by routine. There's too many people that live their life as slaves to fucking culture and heritage and this kind of stuff. Like, obviously, we live in Scotland. Like, there's the whole Rangers Celtic divide. I've never been a football fan, but like, and this is just because it's more direct. But you talk to like a Celtic fan, you ask them, why do you support your team? And they're like, oh, because they're the best. And it's like, no, really, like, on what day did you decide this is a team? Like, what was it? It's like, oh well, I'm Catholic, isn't I? Or like, oh well, it's what my dad supports, whatever. And it's like, but so someone decided 100 hundreds of years ago, I'm going to follow this religion, and now because they made that decision, you need to wear green t-shirts and you need to fucking you hate these people and like, and you've never questioned that. Like, it fucking bugs me, man. And there's too many people that they live every Monday the same as every Monday, every Tuesday. Like today's the 18th of February 2023. There's never been an 18th of February 2023. Like, yeah, it might be fucking Saturday. You might eat the same dinner as you had last night, but do something new, do something different. Make the 18th of fucking February count for 2023, and then do something different. Like too many people get caught up in just routine and normality, and too many people have far too much doubt these days about what they can possibly do. You know what I mean? And a lot of the time, it's just taking that first step, and you realize how easy it is. But people don't want to take that first step, or they want to sit back and they don't want to shatter the illusion. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I could do that. I could write a film. I could act. I could, do a podcast. It's like, are you gonna do it? It's like, no, 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 no. And it's like because they don't want to possibly fail at it. You know what I mean? But that's experience as well. Like, success is an experience, failure is an experience. If you're just looking for experience, then you're winning either way. It's when people, like I say, they start attributing good or bad. If you see the world as just a ton of experience that you can learn from, successful, unsuccessful, whatever, it changes your whole perception of things. And if you also see the world as just trying to experience as much as possible, like, yeah, you need, in this fucking, like you said, this capitalistic mode that we find ourselves in, you need money to do what you want to do. Like, if you want to experience driving a Ferrari, you're going to have to pay money for that. But if you could manage your experience to just, I want to be happy driving a car, that opens up so much more roads than the specific, I want to drive a Ferrari, whatever. And that's the thing that gets me up in the morning every day of this fractal life is just, what can I experience today? And it's something that I've thought a lot. Like, there's been so many days where I've woke up in the morning and something's happened that by the time I go to sleep that night, I'm not a completely different person, but I've got a completely different perspective. And there's something happened throughout that day that I had no idea was going to happen when I woke up in the morning. And that to me is life. Do you know what I mean? Like, the routines, like, we need routines. You're going to have to go to work and that kind of stuff, but don't be a slave to the routine. Allow yourself some wiggle room, allow room for unplanned shit to happen, for you know, to just go off on a tangent or chase down some whimsical idea that you had when you were 5. Like, I realized not too long ago, like, my 5-year-old self would love who I turned out. Do you know what I mean? How I turned out now, there was a couple of years where he would have thought I was quite a sketchy dude and blah, blah, blah. But if I could talk to my 5-year-old self now and tell him what I've done and the stuff that I can do, like, he would be proud of me. And that to me means so much. Like, I don't have fucking, you know, millions in the bank. I don't have my own place or that kind of shit. But I'm proud of, like, just little personal wins that I've had. Do you know what I mean? And the fact, like, my 5-year-old self would be proud, and I didn't like give in to the rat race and just like, oh, I'll just work in an office the rest of my life. I'll just, it's fine, you know what I mean? The wages are all right, it's an all right job, and that's where most people seem to be. And the path that I've taken, it's been hard, and I've had to sacrifice shit, but it's allowed me to stay more true to my original plan. Do you know what I mean? And I actually think like your perception of the world when you're 5-year-old is a lot more truer and purer to what it should, like the ultimate, you know,
Yeah.
because you're looking at the world with wide-eyed wonder and stuff, and everything's new, and you are experiencing in that. And I think that gets taken away from us. Like, there's a great quote: "We do not grow old because no, we do not stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll still go and climb trees and this kind of shit. I'll still like that's more parkour based, but most people get to a certain point and they think, oh, that's it for me.
But
You
no, that's
know,
perfect that you said that earlier, right? Because that's what popped to mind, and that's more parkour based. What is parkour? Parkour is you and your mates running up garages, man. You and your mates
right,
grabbing onto the
right,
like running up the wall and holding onto the
right.
top of the wall and pulling yourself up. Because we used to do
That's
that
it.
shit as well, and that's what it's so perfect you would say that, man, right? Because um, I was thinking the other day when I was on the way to work, 'cause I'm the same. I'm also on an extremely routine job. It's washing dishes, man, just 9, 10 hours essentially a day. And it's a challenge, and it's like you know. But what's really bizarre is that there's almost a liberation in the process of as I'm standing there washing dishes all the time. There's a couple of points actually what you said that I'll touch on, man, because so it's that circumstance. So I'm the same. I'm trying to the youth that you're describing that you get cathartic release with parkour. I get that doing cartoons, right? So it's the same thing. Like it's cartoons, man, and I feel like and I was thinking about this the other day because I had a really close friend, and she said to me, she was like, you're like a 12-year-old boy. That's what she called me, right? And I was like, what the fuck? So I was thinking about this on the way to, I was going to say the way to school. I was thinking about this on the way to work the other day, right? And I was thinking, what is that? And it reminded me of Walt Disney when he says that we should hold on to our childlike innocence. And I was thinking, how is it like I'm like this then, man? I mean, my son, and he helps to kind of keep on ground. But I was like, I think it's largely to do with potentially residual personality, but I think circumstances helped. But I think it's to do with doing cartoons because you're in a really childlike mentality. You're trying to get humor, excluding any times where I'm trying to do like mental health ones or stuff like that. But it keeps you on a youth in basis. It's kind of like a position of wonder because you're trying to get obviously laughs. You're trying to, but at the same time, you're also trying to conceptualize an idea which corresponds with a wide number of people. And that's what's interesting. So if you create something that corresponds with a wide number of people, you're getting closer to something that's fundamentally true than not. And I think that's what's interesting is that you see it, and not only do I see it through people's response online. So when I do specific cartoons, and so what I'm doing now, as you've seen, is like a cartoon a day. But this is all work that I produced like 2, 3 years ago, right? And what's interesting is when I uploaded it 2 or 3 years ago, I remember some of them that really stood out. And so when I'm uploading them now and I'm like, right, I'll choose that one today, I was like, I bet this one still stands out. And it's ding, 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 ding. And it's like everybody's like responding. And I'm thinking, well, what it? So then I'm the same as yourself, man. I'm very analytical just for revelation purposes, really. So I'm like, well, what is it with that one that gets everybody? What is it with this one that doesn't? What is it, blah, blah, blah? Because the whole point is maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been a reduced uh, display of people's opinions because my audience would have been smaller, but at the same time it's just a larger reflection now. So because there's more people that are following online, all that shit, I get more of an in-depth, it's the same representation just on a slightly bigger scale, and I just think it's really interesting that because that's what I mean. Cartoons is allowed to hold on to the youth, and I'm the same. It keeps an open mind towards what's possible. And I think what's really important about that, about when you mentioned about the working life and about how society imposes this, it's a societal prison in the forms of expectation, and the expectation is essentially defined in what you should have, what you should be getting, and they're fed to you, almost like on a conformist basis that the society agrees. So therefore, I know it's also mechanical through economics and to keep something going, but the basis of that in itself is is fucked. So that in itself. But yeah, and that's all I think is that at the same time. So when I was worked the other day and we're talking about I think I was fucking about watching this and I'm like, fuck you, dickhead. I was like, it's true, man. You were there. You listened to it. But it was like, so the amount of times that I'll be talking about the human potential, the human capacity to create, the ability for us to literally bring in fucking anything possible. And I was like, and what's interesting about it is how much of an inhibiting factor going to work for 9.5 hours is. And interestingly, because I was speaking to who the fuck was that? I was talking to somebody the other day, and that's who it was. I was speaking to the chef the other day, and she was saying, and I was telling her about how the fact that, as we were talking about before, you've got a cyclic nature of existence, and as there's seasons of creativity, as there's seasons of like summer and winter and autumn, blah blah, and they're cyclic every single year. They arrive at the same time every year, and they move past, and then they move into the next stage every single year. Even though we see these seasons, there's also other seasons. The other season that I interpret is something that's on an emotional scale. It's not on a physical scale. It's emotionally displayed. So there'll be seasons that, for some reason, you'll be really creative at the same time every year, like really creative at the same time every year, and then there'll be points in that year that there'll be lows in it. And what's interesting is I've started becoming more self-analytical, potentially more introspective to my own condition, my own human condition. When you're more introspective, you get to watch yourself in real time, and as a consequence of that, you kind of come into alignment with, well, what were the external factors that made me feel that at that time? And that's when I'm coming to that whole thing of every single time every year. There's moments of creativity, there's moments of potential, there's moments where opportunity, there's moments where there's lots of people wanting to socialize with you, and then there's another point when there's nobody there, man. You're, what the fuck? And it's everybody at the same time, and it's like numerous people, and all of a sudden there's nobody, and it's like a reflection. And a side point to that, when I was working at a different job, so I went that. So essentially, work is a suppressant to those emotional changes, because at the times when there's a lot of creativity going on, or there's a lot of potential and a lot of the ability to create, if you're confined in an office, or you're confined into a 9 to 5 that suppresses any form of ability to be autonomous with your actions, you miss the opportunities. And over long periods of time of missing those opportunities, you then become in a position where you think those things aren't possible, they don't exist, because your day's been stolen from you at a young age, and the opportunity to be creative is stolen from you at a young age. And because we're conditioned in that position and we're habitual creatures, humans become comfortable with circumstance. You can become, I mean, fucking hell, there's that syndrome where you get fucking something bad happen to you and you eventually become comfortable with the thing happening because it's so habitual. The what?
Stockholm syndrome.
That's it, exactly. Brilliant, man.
Become friends with the kidnappers, basically.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that it's like with work. People have Stockholm syndrome in their job. They're in a position. That's what it's like. They're literally trapped in their job. And I think that's where you see a legitimate spark. You see a legitimate energy that's present in the eyes of those that have been able to detach and follow their dream, or at the very minimum, still engaged in a 9 to 5, but are in the background. That like I refer to work as not my real life. Like this, the channel and creating animations is my real life. That's what this is. So I just temporarily have to mediate it by going to this place as a consequence of the default financial position we're all in. And I think that's what's so exciting and what's so important, is that the thing that the lifeblood of creativity is that fucking energy force we're talking about that's not still earlier, and it's active in everybody. And just because you go into a position of work and you're like, I hate to fucking go to this job today, it doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter the circumstance in life. If you have the ability to go to your job, you also have the ability to put your mind in a place of, how can I free myself from this? How can I fucking like create a world that's exclusively of my own making, and inevitably that takes a long period of time. But even for those that are potentially in their 50s and 60s and coming to this revelation, it's not a case where you're like, oh, I'm never going to have to get detached from my work. You can literally free yourself by putting yourself in a different perspective, and putting into action on a daily basis something that you love, that like liberates you from your job. And I mean job in the case of like employment, because I've wrote this book called The Productive Path, and I put in it, in fact, it wasn't that. I'm working on this other thing called The Philosophy of an Average Man, and it's a book that I'm doing over the course of 10 years, 10 years, and I'm about, I don't know, 7,000 words in or something like that. And it's just statements essentially, of like that you come to yourself. It's like a metaphorical statement that rings true almost from any angle. So I just document it. So I've been doing that over the course of the past couple of years, and inside one of them, I wrote, "Be eager to work, but do not be eager to be employed." And I think it's because of the fact that, you know what I mean? And it's like that thing where it's like, you really should want to be able to be productive on a daily basis, but not under the umbrella of another man's dream. So I was saying this to my son the other day, where I was like, I was like, you know, when you're on your path, and you know when you're chasing your dream, because you're creating something that wasn't here before you. I was like, and you know that when you're in a circumstance where you're like, I really like this, but the thing was in existence before you came onto this planet. If it was there before you got here, it's no yours, man. It's somebody else's. And that's how I see this. And interestingly, just to kind of touch, because I was mentioning quotes there and I forgot about it, but when you're talking about the how it seemed like it's a cyclic and we're just going through this same cycle all the time, and it's like I've been here before, and it's just that's all we're doing, try to experience. I'm working on the CANNAMAN movie at the moment, and it should be ready by summer. It's taken an enormous amount of work, but I've never felt so liberated. And when this thing happens, I think I'm going to be about 3 years in just this moment, man. I swear to God. But inside it, there's an alchemist, and CANNAMAN speaks to the alchemist, and the alchemist said, CANNAMAN's like, you seem familiar, and CANNAMAN says to him, yeah, life is a lived memory being experienced in real time. And it was one of those things where that's what it feels like. It's like life is a lived memory. We've all been here before. It's all happened. It's all whatever, but we're experiencing it in real time, And I think that's what's interesting is that you see these synchronistic events that happen in life when the universe you're in communication with the universe, when you put your mind into an introspective position and frequently a meditative position based on your craft, based on whatever you're doing. But personally, in my own position, I use the craft, I use the drawing. That puts me into a meditative position because it's like an hour, 2 hours of me focused on an image. And again, I'll talk about this forever, Lee, but there's a really interesting thing that I've noticed about the nature of the image. So when I'm talking about the animation series, so each single piece, it's pen and paper, pen and pencil on paper or rubber, every single frame that you see I've drawn, right? So I'm creating a world on one square A4 sheet of paper, and I find it really intriguing, right, that one line out of place affects the entire image. And in order to have that one line, so it's again that macro thing, if you focus on the micro, you'll figure out the macro. Every time I do one line, it has to be in alignment, therefore it will contribute towards the greater of the image. And if I don't focus, which is the precursor, the perceiver, if I don't focus on that fucking line, if I don't focus on the image, it'll be askew. So there's this relationship just by engaging in the craft, and you're a musician, and it's the same thing. If you don't focus on a particular melody, a particular tune, how you play the instrument correctly, there's a layering phenomena that's present. And I think, just to take me back to the work thing, the layering phenomena that's present is you have work, you have this default financial position, you have this fatigue element that sets in as a consequence of a busy day, you have the challenges of a cycle of Monday to Friday, I'm trapped in this position. That's a layering phenomena. And to liberate you from that, you have to include in that something that truly allows you to transcend. And it's got to be based in love. There's got to be a love of the craft. You've got to truly love it. And what's helped personally on my own side is that if you do it at the beginning, if you focus on helping others with it. So essentially, that all this started, it was trying to do cool shit for my sons. And then it went from doing attempting to do cool books for my boys, to then the next thing was me trying to go like, well, if I do really well with this fucking animation thing, then I'll be able to give them a better life, and this is going to be quality and blah, blah, blah. And what I've came to notice, and the process of that, even though that's the fucking, that's what I want so much, that I'll be honest, man, it feels like I've already won it, because every time I'm creating the craft, every time I'm doing the thing, I'm like in a fucking place of complete still. So it's like every time I'm engaged in it, it's a still position. And I think that's what childhood would be if it's not imposed upon bullshit adults or rules and blah, blah. That's what the childlike mind is. It's a constant position of stillness, and you're able to see it for what it is. But yeah, so 100% agree with the position of working, and it suppresses you, man, because that's how I've interpreted it a lot. It's just that I'm in a position where I'm trying to get back to the craft, I'm trying to do it, and you've got these, and that's the other thing I was going to say as well, was that, like, when you're in a position where you've been away from it for so long, right, and you've done nothing but focus on your fucking introspection, self-analysis, and then try to develop your craft, and then you go into a framework such as like paid employment, minimum wage shit, you see it explicitly as a machine that inhibits nothing but the soul of the human. It's just a machine, and it comes in the forms of tons of different buildings, different jobs, blah, blah, blah. But the framework's the same, that it just inhibits us, it suppresses us. And I said it, I actually said it the other day, and it was like, it becomes to a point where if you engage in that for so long, and you engage with employment for so long, and you're allowed to like suppress your soul for so long, and for you to, it gets to the point where you don't even realize that something's living inside you waiting to come out. You think it's no there. You're like, nah, I didn't have that, man. And that's why when I've been talking like manically like this to people in those environments, they get uncomfortable. Some people, so there's a spectrum. Some people just, their eyes light up. I mean, I had somebody tell me the other day that they had goosebumps when I was talking about this kind of shit, and I was like, do you know why that's happening? It's because it's true, and you're receptive to it. Exactly, you're receiving that shit. Whereas there's other individuals who will literally get themselves busy. They'll start to, I better move this, I better put that over there. Shut the fuck up, mate. And that's what it's like. And it's because of the fact that that's the I've missed it, I don't have it, this is uncomfortable. That's the precursor before their ego would snap and then they realize that there's more. You know, that's that condition, that fear condition. But yeah, but sorry for fucking rattling, man. It's just that's one of the things I've noticed, frequently.
Like one of the early indicators to me, like not how bullshit the working world is, but just like it was just an experience I had. Like I was in the army, and I came out of it, and I was working in a warehouse, and my job, it was like a electronics warehouse. We were building calculators, so I get a box of microchips and then 2 tubs of wires. I took a microchip, soldered the wire on it, put it to the side. Took a microchip, soldered wire, put it to the side. That was it for 8 hours a day, right? So I was 17 at the time, and I started talking to the guy next to me like 3 days in. I was like, "Oh, so how long have you been here?" He's like, "Oh, that'll be 17 years now." I'm like, "What? Just doing this?" He's like, "Ah, well, the job changes every 6 months, you know." And by change, he means like the next month you might have to solder one wire on, or it was the exact same thing, but just subtle changes.
Yeah.
And see, when he said that 17 years, and I was 17 years old, I'm like, that's my entire fucking life that you've spent sitting. Is this what the working world is? And I left school with no qualifications. All I wanted to do was join the army. So I kind of like didn't, you don't need to be that smart to be a soldier, kind of thing. And I joined when I was 16, and they sent me to the Army Foundation College. But I'd been in cadets for years, like I was a fucking corporal in cadets. So I used to study, like I get books in the SAS, and I would study weapons, tactics, and like I wanted to be special forces. And I went in, and they sent me to the Army Foundation College. Now infantry training's 24 weeks, but when they send you to the Foundation College, it's 48 weeks, and like a lot of it's classroom textbook stuff. So instead of like, right, let's go to the range, here's an SAE, like here's how you strip it, blah blah blah, it was turn to page 48. Figure 1 is the magazine, that's the fucking chain, like all this shit. And I'm like, I already had over 1,000 hours in the range by this point using these weapons, and I don't really do well in like classroom situations. I need to, like, I can't learn. I don't know if I've got ADD or fucking autism or some shit, but I cannot learn in a classroom. It's either give me this shit and I'll go and read it myself, or give me hands on, like
practical action.
Yeah, practical experience. So I ended up leaving before I like passed out because it was just I couldn't fucking take it. And then I ended up at this job in the warehouse. And after he said that, like he'd been here for 17 years, it put the fear into me. And I ended up walking out like a couple of weeks later. And then I had a bunch of other jobs. Like I'm now in my 59th job. Um, and I had a couple of jobs in between that. Ended up back in the army when I was 19. And this time I thought, right, I'll go back in. I'll do it right this time, just 24 weeks infantry training. Then I'm there. I'll spend at least 10 years, do whatever I can do in that 10 years, and I'll come out. I'll be like 30. I can still fucking see what I want to do in the world. So went all the way through training again. And they do like infantry training, they do strip you down and build you back up. Do you know what I mean? They do need to take away the civilianness from you and the attitude and that kind of shit. And they do need to build you back up so that you follow commands and, you know, kill if necessary. Like they need to turn you into soldiers basically. So I've been through that twice now. And then I went through it the second time, done everything, was about to go to my battalion, and then they give you another medical, and I had a perforation in my eardrum. So I can hear kind of all right, but if I was constantly using automatic weapons, it would have eventually ruptured. So that was me. I just planned out the next like 10 years of my life, and then they were like, "No, we don't want you. Go back home." So then I ended up becoming a support worker. Like that was my first job after the army, was a support worker for people with learning difficulties, and I'd done that for 6 years. And then I ended up working on World War Z, and that's I want to make a short video or a reel or something talking about this, because it's like all I wanted to do when I was growing up is join the army. Like that was my only dream. That was the only thing I ever thought about. And then I took it to a certain point, but then like I get discharged. Like just fucking that was it, over. But then I worked as a support worker for 6 years, which was not what I wanted to be doing. Do you know what I mean? The guy, I worked with the same guy the whole time, and he was like heavily autistic, so every day had to be the same as every other day as per routine, otherwise it, affected him.
Yeah.
So I'd done that, and then I saw an ad on Facebook, funnily enough, and they were looking for ex-military to play like SWAT and riot cops in World War Z, and I was like, I'm technically ex-military, do you know what I mean? So I applied for it and I ended up getting it. So I played the riot cop in World War Z. And my first day on set, like I've walked out and I'm in full riot costume, and they were filming it in George Square in Glasgow. So like you've got 4 roads going around it, and they were filming basically different scenes in each one. So you had like zombies fighting SWAT teams, you had like cars and trucks getting blown up, you had Brad Pitt running down here. And after like being in the army and having that same kind of level of excitement, and like there's weapons and there's fucking we're doing this and that, because that's one thing I like to be stimulated. Do you know what I mean? I like shit going on. I like to see surreal stuff. I like to be a part of like big shit happening. Probably because I spend so much time like not doing stuff like that, like just sitting smoking, like watching random YouTube videos. I like to get out. When I get out, I like to get out. So yeah, my first day on set, I just saw all this like surreal, fucking incredible shit happening. I was like, no, this is what I want to do. And I didn't think I wanted to be an actor. And I can clearly remember like Brad Pitt was standing 10 feet away from me, and there was a AD, an assistant director, that was running around like giving out bottles of water to people. And I thought, right, between Brad Pitt, one of the biggest stars of all time, and that random guy giving out water, there must be somewhere within this industry that I can work, which means that I get to wake up and see this shit every day. Like that was why I wanted to get into filmmaking, was just to have such a surreal life that was every day was different. There was new shit happening. There was fucking stuff that you could be a part of. Do you know what I mean? And like, because I can remember the first time I really fell in love with film was when I was 8 years old. I knew about Star Wars at this time. I had like a couple of the toys and shit, but I'd never seen it. And it was, I think it was I can't remember if it was the 25th or the 30th anniversary, and they were re-releasing it in VHS. So it was like the first three films, or the first fucking three. I know it's like they're the prequels or whatever the fuck. The first three Star Wars films.
Yeah.
I got them in VHS, and I watched the first one. And like I was 8 years old, like I was in the demographic, I was there, I was fucking in a galaxy far, far away. I was into this shit. And then the credits rolled, and then there was a making of documentary after it.
Right.
And it was a making of like the Death Star run and like the Canyon run and all that kind of shit. And I'm watching this, and it was just like they just had tables, like pasting tables, like wallpaper pasting tables, with, like grey squares on them, and then they had like X-wing on strings, and they were just going yeah. And I'm like, is that how they've done that? Like, is that it? And like, I know for a lot of people, it kind of bursts a bubble when they see that the magic was ruined. But all it did for me was enforce it even more. Like, is that how fucking I've got toys, I've got spaceship, I've got string, I could fucking is that? And it just fucking the fact that I'd just seen like such an epic fucking battle, and Vader and ships and pew pew, and you're there, and then I see how it was done, and it was so fucking simple and basic. Like that to me was the magic of filmmaking. Like you can just you can make people believe. Do you know what I mean? Like I know Scorsese came out not too long ago, and he says like Marvel movies aren't real cinema and all this kind of shit. And as much as I love Scorsese, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I would go and see Goodfellas at the cinema.
Mhm.
Like, I love that film, but like, and I love drama and that kind of shit. But for me personally, just me, cinema should be shit like fucking superheroes and spaceship shit that you can't see here.
Yeah.
It should be like it's presented to you. I want to see fucking ninjas fight each other and fucking flip, and like that's to me what cinema is. And then to actually get to be a part of that on any fucking level, I thought like that would be enough for me. Do you know what I mean? And then from there, I was just really fucking lucky. Like I thought, as much as I thought, right, like I had a lot of anxiety and shit back then. It looks like I'm giving you the origin story of acting now.
I'm
But
glad because I was going to ask, so that's good.
so yeah, I was fucking like had a lot of anxiety and that kind of shit. So after I'd done World War Z, I thought, right, I'll try and be an actor. I'll just try it. I'll just see what happens. So I knew there was like low budget films, like student films and shit getting shot around Glasgow. So I started adding Facebook pages and this kind of shit. And there was a young director. It's like his first film. Basically, everyone on it was like one of their first projects, and it was a detective neo noir thriller kind of thing. And they were looking like they had the full cast list, and it was like lead roles, lead roles. I'm like, nope, 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 nope. And then halfway down it, there was Man in Club, and he had like 2 lines, and I'm thinking, Man in Club, I can be Man in Club. Do you know what I mean? I could handle Man in Club. Because like all I'd done at this point was World War Z, and like you don't see me or anything, but I was there. You know what I mean? And I get to see it also. I thought, right, fuck it, I'll try and be an actor. So I went in and auditioned, and I read with the director. He came in as like the detective, and I said my 2 lines, and I fucking nailed them. Because it was like meant to be, it was set in American stuff, so I had this accent for my 2 lines, and I'd memorized my 2 lines, and I was happy that I could remember 2 fucking lines of dialogue. So I done it, and the director Stuart, he was like, "Right, Lee, that was really really good. Would you want to read for the coroner? Like this is another character because they just sent me my 2 lines. Do you know what I mean?" And he's like, "We've got another character, the coroner. He's got a bit more dialogue and that kind of shit." And I'm like, I'll read like whatever. Like I didn't know this was my fucking first audition. I didn't even do like drama in school or shit. I'd get my cunt kicked in if I'd done drama in school. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like that's how I grew up. Like for me, like I grew up in a fucking like council street in a flat, like actors and like working in fucking film and shit. It's just not something you even think is accessible to you. Like it's not
Yeah.
even you don't even dare to dream kind of thing. You think, right, I'm going to work in a warehouse, a factory. I'm going to get a bird pregnant. That's what you
Yeah.
do around here. So
It's funny that just interjectly. You know that I thought that as well because I'm exactly a similar circumstance, and it's like I think anything of a creative nature implies weakness, and I think that's what that is. It's like, oh look, he's weak.
but it's funny as well because like there's people like some people I grew up with, like they love films, they love action films. Like, oh, you see that when they fucking die, blah blah blah. But then you say, oh, I'm going to be an actor, and the reaction is completely fucking opposite. It's like, but why do you like? You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about here? Like, I want to do that shit, like the shit that we all like. But why do you think you can do it? It's like because they thought they could do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so to go back, so he just gave me the script for the coroner, and it was coroner kind of dialogue, like medical fucking body shit, and it's American again, so I came up with this other accent and spot, and I'm cold reading it just off the page, and like I'm fucking flustered and shit. And Stuart's like, "Oh, that was really good. Do you want to read for Detective Boston, like the lead?" And I'm like, "No, not really, but all right." So me and him read for fucking. We done another scene, and again I had to fucking try a new accent and like just read it off the page and that kind of shit. So he just said, "All right, thank you very much," and I left. So he phoned me a couple of days later. He's like, "Right, Lee, I spoke to the people, like the crew and that, and we want to offer you Detective Boston, the lead." I'm like, "No, like I don't want to be the lead, mate. Like this is just this," and I explained to him like, "This is just me trying something out. I just want to see if I can actually like be in front of camera and say something and not like run out fucking screaming. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to do a fucking like that's a lot of fucking responsibility to me." He's like, "No, we really like what you did, so just like it's fine, we'll work for you and that kind of shit." So I went in and I done that, and it was like it was the script was good because it was like 4 different mini stories, so it gave me like there was differences within them, and like I realized this was something that was a saving grace. I can memorize script pretty easily. All I need to do is read it a couple of times and then write it out, and see once I've wrote it out, it's basically in there. And it's just this hack that I've picked up because it was something I was really, really worried about. Like my memory's not the best at times and that kind of shit. And I was just fucking like the fact I hadn't prepared, like I hadn't studied any of this kind of stuff. I was just winging it. I was like, that's the one thing I need to do is be able to know the script at least. So, and that's what I found out. As long as I write it out, like the full fucking script in my own hand, like not type it. Like since I've been acting shit, I've wrote scripts and I always write the first draft of it by hand, because I don't really know why I've done it the first time. I've just always done it since, but it do help. I think it helps you connect to what you want to do because you don't throw words away. Like, see, when you're typing, it's fucking blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But when you're writing it, you know, it's like you were saying earlier, every stroke needs to be in there, and it
So much
connects
more.
you more.
It's very intimate. It's a really.
Yeah,
You're getting much more closer to what it is. You're not
yeah.
not connected. Whereas I get what you're saying on the keyboard. You're disconnected.
So yeah, I went in and like it's cringy to watch it now. Like this was like 11 years ago now. But like the fact that, like I say, a lot of it, a lot of the cast and crew, it was either the first production or like they hadn't done a lot of stuff, so we were all kind of were in the same boat. And it was, you know, I felt like, all right, cool, I've done it. I set out, can I be an actor? That's a film. I acted in it. I was the lead. That's it, done. And that was my only goal, and I achieved that the first time. And that's where I think a lot of people fuck up. Like, take acting for instance. Someone might get into it and be like, right, I won't be successful until I've got an Oscar, or I won't be successful until I've signed that first $1 million contract, or whatever the fuck. And they'll keep going for that. And every time that they don't get that, they'll be pissed off at themselves, or you know, it might have a negative effect. Whereas me, my goal, my only goal from this was to see, like, from being on set on World War Z and seeing like Brad Pitt, I was like, could I do that? Could I be the guy in front of the camera saying the thing? And I tried it and I done it and it was all right. So that's me achieved my goal. Everything that's happened since then is just gravy. It's just extra, and that means I've got none of the. I don't have a lot of the same pressures that a lot of actors that I know put themselves under, like to constantly be chasing auditions or constantly be doing that, whatever. And a lot of the stuff has just very synchronistically fell into my lap. Do you know what I mean? Like I've just been approached by like one of the last things I've done. I played Iggy Pop in a music video for Duran Duran, and they approached me, and like I'd done an advert for BT Sport where I played like a rock star as a bass player in a band. And then it was like 2 days after that, I get this call to see if I wanted to play Iggy Pop. I'm like, aye, and it felt like I'd done the BT Sport thing to get that feeling of like being a rock star and like on stage because I've been a musician for years, but I use that term very loosely. Like we were in a band, but we never like performed or shit. So I always had that kind of dream of being a rock star, and then I get to live it out in this BT Sport advert. It was for the Europa League. People might have seen it. It was such a good shoot, man. And then a couple of days later, just casting people had seen my picture, and because I had like long hair and shit, they asked me to be Iggy Pop, who's obviously a fucking like icon. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, how the fuck does this keep happening? Like, I remember I get flown to Chicago to shoot some adverts, and I get called. I was sitting eating my dinner on the Wednesday night. I'll need to go back a bit. There was a thing in Chicago called Carnival. See, one of these walk through scare attractions with like people with chainsaws chase you and all that kind of shit. It's like a big deal in America. And this is a big one called Carnival. So it was at the Sears Centre Arena. That's where they were hosting it. And the manager of the Sears Centre Arena went to college with a Scottish guy called Jamie, who ended up running a creative marketing company kind of thing. So Carnival needed an advert, and Ben, the guy in America, says, "Oh, my mate, he does shit like that." So he got in touch with Jamie to see if he could put together an advert. So I seen the casting call for it. It was to play like a killer clown, and it was unpaid but good exposure, that kind of shit. And at the time, I was just taking any fucking gig I could get to get like showroom material and stuff. So I went and auditioned, and I remember going to the audition and I was thinking like, because I'd done some stuff at this point, but I was still kind of like not 100% sure like if I was nailing it or like what I was doing really. And I thought to myself, right, this is a killer clown, so you can either go in like these people in the audition, if you go in and just fucking unleash and go nuts and fucking embody this character, you'll either get the role and like you'll get to work with him and you know you like it will be cool, or you'll make an idiot of yourself and you'll never see these people again. Do you know what I mean? and it's a killer clown. Like I've seen fucking, I used to love watching it when I was younger, all that kind of shit. But I'm just going to go in and fucking, like go for this. And I went in and really, really went for it, and ended up getting the job. So we filmed this advert in like an alleyway in Glasgow at like 3 in the morning with junkies going by. I'm in this full killer clown costume. They sent, it was like a prosthetic mask we had, but it was like a really expensive one. It was cool as fuck. They sent the mask over from America for us to use. So I looked like the real deal. There was a girl, Sasha, like I was chasing her and catching her and cutting her guts up and throwing them against the wall. We had like linked sausages to like throw. It was a good shoot. Like the fact it was in Glasgow at 3 a.m. with junkies and shit. So I filmed it, and I went in and done the audio replacement like a week before I got the call. And I finished that, and I thought, all right, that was cool. I'll get some good footage out of it. Blah blah blah. So I'm sitting eating my dinner, and my phone goes, and it was Jamie. And as I was like answering it, I thought, oh, I probably need to go in and re-record some lines or whatever the fuck. I was like, oh, how you doing, mate? And Jamie goes, leave us, man. Could you fly to Chicago on Friday morning? And this is like Wednesday night, and I'm like working as a support worker still and shit. And I was like, oh, I'd love to, mate, but I'm fucking skint. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? He's like, no. The company, we've like sent over an edit, and they love what we've done, and they want to take us over to film stuff at the attraction. So it's all expenses paid. Like, if you're free, we can go. And I'm like, aye, fuck it, let's fucking go. Like, I'd always wanted to go to the States, but never been and that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So I hung up, and I was just like, what the fuck? Just phone, made sure I could get the time off work. And I'm sitting in the plane, like I'm feel wishy, like a fucking shitty wee bit of Scotland, council estate, blah blah blah. And I'm sitting on this plane going to Chicago to film an advert in Chicago, and I'm like, how many actors is there between Wishy and Chicago that have got qualifications and they studied here and they studied there? And I just fell into this shit, and now I'm getting fucking flown. Like, what the fuck is happening? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's so humbling. And like, although I talk about this shit, like, oh, I get to do this and I get to do that, like, I'm sitting like, how the fuck?
Yeah.
How is this happening? Like, it's not like I'm owning the shit or like I think I deserve any of this. I'm like I saw Robert Downey Jr. on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about imposter syndrome and shit. And
Yeah.
like most of the sets that I've been on, I'm in this constant state of like security's going to come up at any minute and be like, "Who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing here? What, you're not meant to be here." And I would be like, "Lads, you are completely right. What way's the door?" Do you know what I mean? Like, but I keep ending up on these big projects and these big sets, and like I can't help but think like this must be building towards something eventually. You know what I mean? Like, especially the amount of times I've watched actors give more kind of honest interviews and like really like open up in the like different settings and stuff. And like if you look at their backstory and like a lot of stuff that these kind of guys go through that leads them to where they are, I'm like just checking boxes as they're talking. Like, yep, that, like fucking. And the success that I have had so far, like I said before, like everything that I do, I kind of as happy I am that it's happened. Every big kind of gig I've had, I've been like, all right, that's probably it.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? There's no way something else is going to come up after that. That must be the pinnacle. Like there's like that must have been like my peak. Do you know what I mean? But then a couple of months later, something else happens, and I'm like, fuck, this is even bigger than the last fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck's going to happen? But again, that's also fucking combated with serious imposter syndrome. Like, what if something big does happen, and then like I, find myself in like an actual set in an actual movie, and like, like it's something that I want to happen, but it's also something that I don't fucking want to happen.
Mhm.
Um, but like I said before, none of it really matters because, as far as I'm concerned, I already achieved what I wanted to do that first day, like 10
Yeah.
years ago when I'd done the thing. So everything that's happened since then is just, it's just that extra.
Yeah. Just grateful, essentially. That's what it sounds like.
Grateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what I'm saying, like, because trying to experience as much as you can. That's why I love acting because I've been a cop like 3 times. I've been a mercenary. I've been I've led armies and this kind of shit. Like and although I've only done it for a month or two or here or there, I've still dedicated myself to it. Like I'm
So,
still,
talk about the Game of Thrones then. How did that come about, and what was that
yeah.
like?
Again, synchronistically, like I started watching Game of Thrones. It had already been out for a few years, not the full thing, but I think it was in like season 4 or 5 when I started watching it. And I can remember watching it and thinking, this is something that I want to do. Like most of the shit I've done at this point has been kind of real world kind of shit. And I was like, I see to do an actual like fantasy thing where you're completely in that world and there's costumes and like sets and like no one's wearing jeans or that kind of shit. Like I really, so I thought to myself like I'd love to work on this show. This is definitely something I'd like to work on. And then I was working one of my random fucking jobs at M&D's. That's Scotland's theme park to anyone outside of the UK. What a fucking theme park it is. um, so I worked there for like 2 weeks, and they had this deal where people from Northern Ireland, they could get the ferry over, and they would get a day at M&D's. It was sweet packaging they were running. So I ended up hating people from Northern Ireland, right? Because sorry to any Northern Irish, but they would always come over, and I was on the swings, like see the carousel swings on the
Yeah,
big long chains, and they go out,
that's right.
and they would like rules of the park. It was my job to tell them the rules before they got on, and it was then my job to enforce the rules. I'm sorry, I'm ex-military. I've still got a bit of that image. You know what I mean? Like, if you're on my fucking ride, you're gonna do it my fucking way. Because if you fuck up, I'm the one that gets my balls booted for it, and I'm
Yeah,
not getting my balls booted for anybody.
yeah.
So before they got on the ride, I would tell them the rules, right? And then they would get on and see if they started kicking the people in front of them or spinning the chains or whatever. But halt! Stop that! I tell you. And most of the response I would get to these Northern Irish people would be like, "Oh, I'm from Belfast. I don't know how to follow the rules." "Oh, I'm from Belfast. Oh, but I'm from Northern Ireland." It's like that's not a fucking excuse. And it was constant. They were constantly like, "Oh, but I'm from Belfast." Like it was just, and I ended up losing the rag like Northern Irish people. So then one day, this Northern Irish chick girl came over with like her girlfriend and two guy mates. Like, I thought they were couples, but they weren't. So the girl Rachel and her mate Rebecca, they kept coming on the swings again and again and again. They were annoying. So we ended up swapping details, and then 11 days later, she proposed to me, and I said yes, and we were like together for 5 years. So I ended up moving. We were long distance for 3 years, and then I moved over to Northern Ireland. And then it was when I was living in Northern Ireland, like I just made the right connections, and I ended up. I was meant to be in season 7, and it got cancelled. And I got the call to say like, oh, it was going to happen. I fucking was telling everybody and blah blah blah, and then it got cancelled. And I was like, fuck. Because it's kind of I learned my lesson. I'll get to this, but I worked in Line of Duty, and I had like a featured role, and then it like the whole scene got cut, and I told everybody that I was doing it. It was like a big fucking. It was like the highest rated drama in the BBC at the time. It was a big thing. This was a featured role. Like this is credits and shit. I'm in it, and then the scene got cut, and like I told people, "Oh, tonight's my episode," and that kind of shit. And then the credits rolled, and my phone's going like, "Oh, fuck, this was you were meant to be in this," and you really sheepishly have to be like, I must have been cut. And then people, it feels like you're like people think I'm bullshitting right now. Do you know what I mean? But I've got like behind the scenes photos and shit. Like I was
Yeah.
there. It's just it's out of your control. But so yeah, I was meant to be in season 7, and that didn't happen. And I worked on some other stuff, and then season 8 was coming out, and I got the call to be Knight of the Vale. Again, this is just because I was ex-military. Do you know what I mean? And that's what they say earlier. Like that was joining the army was my dream. Like all I wanted to do, I'd pinned all my hopes and dreams on it, and then it got taken away. And then, but it worked out so much better for me in the end. And
Yeah.
that's like it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, don't give up hope. Do you know what I mean? As bad as shit looks, and as bleak as things look, and it might look like a brick wall's just been put right in front of you. It's actually directing you to something like better. Like, yeah, I could have went into the infantry, and I could have went to Iraq and get shot or whatever the fuck. But I'm kind of happier that because of where I got to in the army, I was then able to use that to like lead an army on thrones kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like that. In
Yeah.
my eyes, it worked better. So yeah, I got the call. Have you watched Game of Thrones?
I've seen parts of it. Do you know what? One thing I was going to say though, Lee, right? What's really interesting is that in my mind, all I can hear is that there's a separation. So your ego is like, I'm joining the army and I'm doing this, but the universe put in front of you Star Wars behind the scenes. And that's what's
Yeah,
interesting, man. That's what I find really interesting is that on the external, there was already a pre-laid out plan in your periphery vision that wasn't in alignment with your conscious mind. And I just think that's what makes me believe that
yeah.
the universe responds and is conscious and it moves us in a way that's nothing to do with us.
Yeah, well, that's what I said before. It was, although that spark was there, like when I watched Star Wars, I was enthralled by like just the movie itself, and
Yeah.
then how they done it, and like the actual magic of movie making. But at that time, that wasn't something from a class point of view that
Mm.
I thought I had access to. Like I knew at a young age, like we were poor. Do you know what I mean? I knew
Yeah.
that I wasn't growing up in the top echelons of society or anywhere fucking close to it. And I also knew, like, you know, it was the other kids that went and, like, I didn't go on holiday till I was fucking in my teens, do you know what I mean? I
Mm.
knew it's like the other kids that went on holiday, it was other kids that done this, and it would be the other kids that would be actors or doctors or lawyers. I would be, and that's just, you just, at that age, you just take your surroundings as all there is kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You look at your peers, you look at the people around you, and you're like, all right, so this is what I'm going to become.
Mm.
And although, like, yeah, it might have been that movie making spark though that drove me to like want to be in the army and like I say, have a life that was removed and different. You know, it might have been like watching the guys jump into the X-wings and go off to war. That was like, all right, well, the closest thing I can do to that is join the army. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But it turns out the closest thing I can do to that is actually be an actor. You know what I mean? And do it on film. But yeah, the way, because even like parkour and stuff like that, the way I get into that and how that's helped me to land certain roles and to just
Mm.
be a better performer in that. And I didn't know that that was going to be an offshoot of that. And also just, I'd say out of all the stuff I've done, even psychedelics and that kind of shit, the most life changing thing that I've done has been training parkour because it gave me the confidence to pursue so many other things, but it also just gave me such a unique way of looking at the world. Like this isn't my philosophy, but like I think it was Sebastian Foucault that said this. But if you look at how the like the world's laid out, like cities and stuff, you're herded like cattle. You know what I mean? There's railings, there's walls. It's like go this way, go that way. You're
Yeah.
directed to where you're meant to go. But parkour enables you to like if you come up against something that's meant to block you like a railing, you're actually using that to propel you forward and up and over.
Yeah.
And it's allowing you to make like the philosophy behind like parkour is finding your own path. And that equates to obviously the immediate physical training in the physical aspect of finding your own path, overcoming this, jumping here, doing that. But it translates so beautifully into the mental aspect of life and the philosophical aspect of life. It is find your own path. Don't follow the previous set fucking routes and don't let that thing stop. Like, I mean, people come up against like a 2 foot high railing. They're like, oh, I can't possibly go that way. That way's blocked off. I must go this way. It's like you can step over it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like I heard a story about like elephants, like when they're young, like elephants are in captivity and in circuses and stuff, they'll get the tether and they have to like tie it to a stake and they have to drive the stake into the ground so deep to make sure the elephant can't pull it away. But as the elephant gets older, they don't they can just put a stick in the ground and tie the rope to it because the elephant just remembers from like, all right, if I'm tied to this, I can't move.
Mm.
And that's the same as like what I think a lot of humans have done. They've lost the ability to just question things and to
Mm.
just step over the fence sometimes and to just go out of bounds sometimes and see what's there. Because like so much stuff wouldn't happen if people weren't, you know, breaking rules or going against the grain or that kind of stuff. That's a lot of time how progress is made. But there's
Actually,
too many
perfectly.
people.
So sorry, Lee.
Yeah,
That was, I was going to say perfectly. There was a thing I seen online, which exemplifies the point beautifully, is that there was a video of flies, and they would just fly all over the fucking shop, and you've probably seen this video, man. And then they put it in a wee jar, and they're all fucking flying out and flying out and flying out. So then they gather them all together, put them in the jar, and put the lid on it. And they keep out the lid on the jar of flies for a specific period of time. Then they take the lid off, and the flies don't attempt to get out. They just stay flying around in their same wee circle, even though they're able to move, because they're conditioned into being inhibited to see the potential.
That's the word. It's the conditioning,
Yeah.
and it's being able to break that. And it's like parkour's such an effective tool for it, because it speaks to like, I mean, there's like conditioning, like societal conditioning, but there's also ingrained human conditioning within us. And like, if I'm standing on the edge of a roof and I'm looking at a roof gap, like, and there's like a consequence of height in between it, like there's something primal within you that's telling you to get the fuck away from the edge of that roof. You're going to slip, you're going to fall, and you feel that your legs turn to jelly. Like, that's your body telling you, get back from there. That's dangerous. You know what I mean? You might fall. You might, like, there's that self-preservation aspect, and to be able to go to that point and to feel that, your body, your fucking, your internal programming telling you to move back, there's danger, and then to take a couple of steps back, take a deep breath, and then run towards that and jump off that edge with full faith in your ability to make it to the other side. You know what I mean? Like, I'm terrified of heights, but I love that feeling of overcoming the gap, like going to the edge of the roof and looking down and checking it out, shitting myself, like, don't want to do it, like, but taking those couple of steps back, taking that deep breath, visualizing it, focusing on it, and then actualizing it all within seconds, minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like, you see something that's scary, something that could literally take your life if it goes wrong. You decide to do it against your internal body, like it's mind over matter in the most pure way in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then you run, and you get that feeling of like, halfway through the jump, you're going to make it, and you've overcame it, and then you land and you roll out of it, and that's when like the confidence comes. That's when the sense of aliveness comes. Like, I've never felt more alive than when I've just landed like a jump or that kind of thing, because you've never been closer to death. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It is, and that's something like people just don't experience.